you have just published the Genesis Antarctica Trinity. Is this your first work, and have you always enjoyed writing?
Okay, well, it is my first work, and there again it isn't. However, this is part of the story as to how it got to be written. I always enjoyed writing when I was sort of in my 20s. I would write loads of poems, and I was very much into radio plays. I think radio drama is absolutely a fascinating medium because the scenery is so good.
The scenery?
The scenery, because it's all in your head.
Okay.
and so yes, I have always had a great love of words.
Right, so how did you come to write the Zandernatis books?
Right, well now the Zandernatis books, it's quite a long story actually in that. It's because, as I said, I started off writing poems and things, and various sorts of pieces, but then I went through a phase of painting.
Huh.
And I was painting works which were, shall we say, visionary, symbolic, and very much influenced by the pre-Raphaelites and by painters like Dali, Salvador Dali.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I was working in the late 1960s and the early 70s. I was actually working in a West End theatre.
Ah, intriguing. How did you manage to get into the theatre?
Well, it was a friend of mine. I'd actually started off in advertising, and but then because of my writing, I wrote a play and I sent it off to a regional repertory company in Hornchurch, and they said, this could be interesting, but it might be an idea if you had some experience in theatre.
Mm-hmm.
You can, if you would like, you could come and work with us as an assistant stage manager.
Okay.
And now an assistant stage manager is a general dog's body. I mean, you could be making properties for one show. The next show you might have a walk-on part and say, "Madam, your carriage awaits," you know, or you could be doing lighting or sound or whatever. And then a friend of mine who was working in this theatre in London, called at the time the Strand. It's now the Novello, very near Covent Garden.
Right.
And so I was working there as an electrician, which is a joke. I didn't know my live cable from my neutral, but it so happened that for some reason or other, I was able to operate the lighting board rather well. In those days, it wasn't all automated. Okay. And so I was able to program it, and so they kept me on for that. And after I'd been there a couple of years, and I'd been doing painting at home, I found this room at the top of the theatre, which people had almost forgotten about. And I went to the manager. I said, "Hey, could I possibly use that room for my paintings?" Because we in the theatre we worked in the morning and did maintenance. In the evening there was a show. But in the afternoon there was all that time, when one could do something else. And so he said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, look, I tell you what," he said, "you can have it rent free, provided you do it up a bit. You paint it up a bit, because it was in a bit of a state." So fine, right. And it was fantastic. It was like 4 meters high and skylight. And it was ideal.
Ideal for an illusionist painter.
As an illusionist painter, yeah. And actually the illusion worked quite well. Because being there, the artists who are in the shows and the impresarios, they would come up to my studio.
Right.
And so I could say, like, to an actress, I would say, "Would you like to come up and see my paintings?" And I actually had some. and I was exhibiting in a smart gallery near Bond Street, and then one day I happened to go to a gallery near St Paul's Cathedral, where there was a painter exhibiting his work. His name was Joffre Boschart. He was Dutch, and the kind of work he did was something which really, really sort of touched my soul. And he was one of the he and his wife were two of the founder members of a movement called the Meta-Realists. Mm-hmm. And he had the technique, both of them had the technique of Salvador Dali, or the Dutch masters.
Okay.
Except that what they did was not sort of random. It was highly symbolic, and everything meant something. And I was completely smitten by this.
And did you actually meet them?
Yeah, it so happened, I don't believe in chance, by the way, but anyway, it so happened that when I went into the gallery, they were there. In fact, I bought a signed print. You know, I couldn't afford the paintings, but I could afford a signed print. And so I met them, and I told them that I was also a painter, and it turned out that they were staying at the Waldorf Astoria, which was like maybe, I don't know, 25 yards from where my studio was.
Coincidence?
Coincidence. So they came up and they saw, and immediately Joffre came into the studio. He said, "Oh, what a wonderful light!" And anyway, I showed them what I was doing, and Ellen Lorien, she said to me, "Well, would you like to come and spend a week with us in the south of France?" And wow. So I went, and they were living at that time in a little sort of shack on the edge of a cliff, literally. There was the little cabin. There was just room for Joffre to have his studio and paint and sleep. And Ellen slept in the front part of it was 2 rooms. Mm. And I slept in the tent outside.
Right.
But it was actually a life-changing experience.
In what way?
Because I wanted to paint like them.
Yeah. Okay.
And I realised that I was missing 10 or 15 years of art school training. Mm. So it didn't happen overnight, but I decided in the end to paint with words rather than paints and brushes.
Okay, so that in fact discouraged you from painting, from continuing to paint.
It was discouraged. It's just that I couldn't meet my own standards. Mm. And I wrote before I painted anyway. And so, but then that made me think. Well, look, they have painted everything I would like to paint. So it's been done. But I would like to write something that would have the same intensity. Mm-hmm. And that was how, in 1974, the original version of Zandernatis got written. And by a sheer chance, I have it here. This is the manuscript, which at the time was all written using a typewriter. So when you wanted to change a word, you had to retype the entire page. No word processing in those days.
No.
And so this was a long story at that time, based on the discovery of a series of urns underneath the Antarctic ice. These were discovered in 1962, and among the documents contained in the urns was this epic poem called the Song of Gorin, and this was the foundation for this entire saga.
So can you tell us a little more about the Song of Gorin?
Indeed, the Song of Gorin is an epic quest, and it is a quest that like Joffre's painting and like the kind of painting I've been doing is full of archetypes, and all these archetypes come together to create a story of their own. and which people can interpret as they want. So the Song of Gorin tells the story of somebody who wakes up in the middle of what we discover is the Paradise Garden, without knowing anything about himself except his name, which is Gorin. And
so he has no recollection of life before that?
No, absolutely nothing. Completely clean slate.
Okay.
And so the Song of Gorin is the saga is how he discovers his purpose, and how he turns out to have a very crucial role to play in the story of this known as Golden City, Zandernatis, and the people who had created it, those who lived there, and in fact the origins of humanity were laid down at this time, and he played a crucial role in making them what they were, and making us what we are.
So these ancient manuscripts, these documents, were found under the ice?
Yeah, by an expedition that left from Wilkes Base in Antarctica in 1962, and they first of all went to the abandoned Russian base of Vostok, which in recent years, by the way, is where they have found an underwater lake very deep under the ice. But they had a secret agenda, and that was to go on towards the Haakon VII plateau, because there had been fossils discovered there, fossils of trees, of leaves, and things which demonstrated that Antarctica at one time was in more temperate waters.
Further north, I
Further
presume.
north.
Right.
And so their secret agenda was to go and see if they could find anything more concrete.
And did they?
And they discovered these urns. The only thing was that it was by accident. They had loads of very expensive equipment with them, but it so happened, rather stupidly, one of their people was going out to find to get some snow to melt down for
drinking water.
And he fell through the ice, and he landed on a ledge which stopped him sort of plummeting into the abyss. And then they went down and investigated, and they found this series of urns, and there were about there were 22 or 23.
And the documents describe a civilization that existed at the time. Can you tell us a little more about that society?
Right. Well, it tells the story of this city, Zandernatis, and these documents are of different types. What is very interesting is that they're mainly, most of them are things like decrees, speeches made by kings, administrative documents and things like that. A lot of it was, in fact, they were pretty boring. But there were these two epic sagas. There was the Song of Gorin, the story that formed the basis of Zandernatis and now Genesis Antarctica, and there was also another one called the Song of the Heroes, which recounted some of the heroic quests and events that went on. And curiously, there were no documents that reflected in any way to religion of any kind. Which is, well, as far as I know, and as far as the experts that we've worked with know, it means it would be the only society of which we have any record which did not have any religion because they didn't need any religion.
So does that mean they were atheists?
No, they weren't atheists, but they didn't need to seek for God, or a god, or at least a god, but I mean the laws by which the world or the universe was operated, they had a great understanding of them inherently. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't need to placate any gods when things were going bad. And what really is the crucial point of all this is that they were not afraid of death.
Why is that?
Because they had total recall of all their previous existences.
You mean they believed in reincarnation?
They didn't believe in it, actually. They knew it to be a fact of life. Ah. And so this meant that they when they started getting old, they realised it was time to, to trade in the body, to trade in the aging body for a new one. And they were invariably having festivals or celebrations because they would remember. You were two guys could meet up and say, hey, you were my sister three lives ago.
Ah, so they believed you could be born again more than once.
Oh yes, they were many times, many times, hundreds of times. And you just worked on each life. You had a certain thing to accomplish, and you could build on it, and you could so it became a sum of their experience, mm-hmm. and it let's say it gave them greater understanding, and instead of just sort of thinking you only live once. I mean, I always thought anyway that expression "you only live once" is one of the most stupid phrases that man has ever invented, because it seems to be absolutely obvious that would be cruelly unjust apart from anything else. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so they knew this to be a fact, and so they didn't need to placate or worship or pray to anybody.
Is this why there's so much resistance to the story being published in this form?
Well, it's certainly true that people in the church and people in other religions do not like this kind of thing, because religion with only one God and only live once kind of concept, it means that the church or the religious order or whatever has an exclusive on truth. Mm. And if you don't do what I tell you to do, you'll go to the hot place. So you'd better do as you're told. And the idea of reincarnation. Okay, at present, reincarnation is quite easy for them to put it to one side and say this is just stupid. It's not in the Bible and all this sort of thing. Apart from the fact that there are several mentions of it in the Bible, anyway. But with this kind of scientific backing, there are many people, many conventional, conservative religious people who don't like this book at all, and did a great deal to prevent it from being published.
Right. Well, I think that concludes our interview this evening. Thank you very much.
Good. Well, thank you, and thank you for having this opportunity to talk about it in your program. And
this is the story of the pre-glacial civilization where our legends were born. Of a perfect paradise where everyone had total past life recall. Of a people needing no religion, only independence from father-mother demigods. This is the story of what we call the fall of man. This is Zandernatis. And now, a trinity, 3 in 1, Genesis, Antarctica, retelling the epic Song of Gorin, written when legends were born. backed by compelling corroborative evidence, background documents, past life memory research programs, the cover-up, and much, much more. These authenticated revelations are as real as you need them to be. Fabulous facts or fabulous fable? Where do you draw the line?